A very good morning and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to today's Hindu News Analysis, where we shall be looking at some important articles which have been released in today's The Hindu Newspaper, the New Delhi edition. So here we are dealing with 3 articles that need a detailed analysis from the perspective of UPSC Mains, whereas 4 articles shall be quickly analysed as they are short and factual and important from prelims perspective. The first 3 articles which need a slightly more detailed explanation range from the problems associated with air safety in Indian aviation sector, and then we talk about the ongoing heat wave in India, causes, consequences. In the end, we shall talk about how the use of disruptive technologies has definitely meant empowerment for India's defense forces, but is that enough? Is there something else that's needed? And on that note, the prelims articles are also very varied today. A lot of important articles in the paper, in fact. So the first one here talks about an economic development which is not so positive, that the household borrowing in India has dramatically gone up. At the same time, there has been a parallel reduction in total savings. What does it mean for the economy as a whole? Then we talk about how the Supreme Court has passed a milestone judgment where it believes that right against climate change is nothing short of a fundamental right. From then we talk about how the Kochi shipyard in India, one of the largest of its kind, has tagged a deal with US Navy for repair and reinvigoration of naval equipments. In the end, we talk about how the Tata Advanced Satellite Systems Limited has successfully been placed in the outer space. And now we begin with a detailed breakup of the very first article of the day. Now do remember, there are a couple of more articles very scientific in nature. For example, there was an article on page 12 which spoke about how diabetes in India is a raging problem related to a very high glycemic index oriented foods. Now that was not very important per se, but the only thing that we need to focus upon there was the meaning itself of glycemic index. So those of you who wish to could also have a brief look at that article. But these are the most important from UPSC perspective, and the first one has been taken from page 6 here. It is Science and Tech, and we are talking about Indian aviation sector. When we say that today Indian aviation sector is one of the largest of its kind globally, we somewhere are neglecting a basic problem that is lying beneath this. So the key highlights of this article are that today when we talk about entering 2024, is Union Ministry for Civil Aviation and the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, are both these bodies primarily concerned with passenger safety in India, or is commercial benefit or monetary benefit, profits, their main concern? So these are certain questions that the article is highlighting. The reason why the article is raising such a grave question and blaming the Union Ministry as well as the DGCA is because of 2 reasons. One is the controversy regarding RESA or RESA. Now, those of you who might be following news regularly may be aware about the Karipur airport of Kerala. Often referred to as also the Calicut and the Kozhikode airport, the Karipur airport in Kerala has been in the news for a very long time now. The main reason is an accident, a horrific incident that in fact had happened back in 2020, which brought to light how a careless miss by the state government led to death and mortality of so many innocent people. Now, when we talk about this 2020 episode, we are talking about a very horrific crash, a plane crash that was experienced by an Air Indian Express flight, which had more than 100 passengers on board and which had crashed at the Karipur airport. The reason was that the RESA, which is known as Runway End Safety Area, in the Karipur airport was not systematic, it was not proper. Therefore, it could not accommodate big and broad aircrafts. Despite that, why were these landings allowed? Why did the state government did not take a timely action? Later, when investigations were done, it was found out that if the RESA in this airport, this entire landing area, was systematic and it was longer, then probably such a grave incident could have been prevented from happening. It is this episode which has been highlighted in this article. It says that after the accident, the Union Ministry of Civil Aviation had clearly told the Kerala government about the risk that is involved in the current system of RESA at the airport. It also said that the safety feature recommended by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau for this 2020 accident clearly said that at least there has to be an expansion to say about 14.5 acres. The state government should acquire at least extra 14.5 acres of land, and then it should clean it, fill it up, and then level it. This was the mandate that the central government had given the state government to prevent future accidents. But since, let's remember that Karipur is a very unique situation. Now this is one airport which is a classic example of a tabletop airport. Here what happens, the RESA or the runway, it protrudes outwards like a cliff. It is not proper. There is a steep cliff there. It is because of this that huge airlines are often in danger when they are landing, huge aircrafts rather. And therefore, it was told that unless there is a proper extension done to the cliff, the state government should not operate it. However, despite this mandate, the state government highlighted that a huge cost is involved behind expanding, filling and then leveling extra land to further expand or elongate this RESA area, and hence state government did not do anything about it. So this is something that the article raises a question at, that this kind of a careless initiative or this kind of a careless miss by the state government, how valid is it? And therefore, how responsible is the Indian government acting towards passenger safety? If this is one issue in the article, another issue raised is about the well-being of pilots themselves. Now, the article argues that in January 2024, the Ministry of Civil Aviation clearly announced revised or amended flight duty time limitations, the FDTL regulations. The purpose behind them was to solve the problem of pilot fatigue. Now, often these pilots are doing multiple rounds of flights in a day. Sometimes, in case the landing is delayed, the pilots are doing extended duty hours without any rest or break in between. Now, given that managing or manipulating an aircraft is something that needs utmost alertness and well-being, because it is a very human initiative, a very good amount of human element is associated in this mechanism, we cannot neglect pilot health and pilot well-being. So airline owners, however, did not respond. They did not follow these FDTL regulations. They said that if we follow these regulations, we will suffer from losses because we have limited staff. We cannot hire a huge staff. Given overall character of economic crisis that's been happening across the world, specifically after the COVID pandemic, many commercial airlines refuse to hire extra staff. They refuse to pay the extra pilots that were on board or the trainees on board, and hence they refused to implement the deadline of the FDTL rules. In fact, much later, the deadline was also extended, that to indefinitely. So all these then just highlight this grey area, that all these delays that we are doing, whether it be the RESA in the case of Karipur Airport or this lack of various commercial airlines and companies to abide by the FDTL rules. What are we talking about? Are we then serious about passenger safety? So this is the main point article is making. The article is also creating some kind of a comparison here. It says that India now should take a cue from countries like Japan, Singapore and United Kingdom, where pilot fatigue management and well-being, better pay, better resting periods are taken very, very seriously. These are the utmost priorities. So if crew is safe, only then we can then ensure passenger safety as well. Similarly, human factor and financial stress. Now the article also calls out Vistara, that is the airline running under the aegis of Tata. It said that it was shocking when recently the reports emerged that the co-pilots or the junior pilots of Vistara Airlines were given an ultimatum by the company to sign the new pay structure contract, and if they did not sign it, they would have been removed from the duty. So this kind of an ultimatum where you're forcing employees to accept a contract which will dramatically reduce their income by more than 50%. This is very, very discouraging, given the fact that young pilots have invested crores of rupees in just obtaining training and then, of course, the license to operate flights. So again, this goes against human rights, and that is also something the article is pointing out too. The article is also saying that why are we not paying our co-pilots in a very fair manner? After all, they are the future captains of our airfares, of our airlines. When they grow up, when they get more professionally mature, then these will be independently in charge of various commercial flights. Now, if they are not well paid, if their well-being is not taken care of, then once again we are failing the human resource element of the aviation sector. So what could be the possible solutions then? So one solution is that India must recognize the International Civil Aviation Organization's Annexure 1, according to which experienced Indian pilots who are operating outside India should be allowed to come back to India, so that we have no deficiency of staff. If there is more staff available, definitely the existing ones will get more rest period. These can also work on a freelance or a contractual basis, but definitely if they have the license and if they are abiding by India's license protocols, then they should be given an opportunity. Similarly, we should utilize the services of retired pilots. Now, most of them who are in good health and who are mentally sound, physically sound to further operate the flights or cooperate the flights, they should also be given some assignments. Apart from that, there has to be a systematic amendment of the age-old 1937 outdated civil aviation regulations, so that we can create a mechanism where not only the crew members, the pilots and the civil aviation staff is well taken care of. We can also make sure that airports infrastructure is abiding by passenger safety norms. So broadly, this is exactly what the article is trying to argue. With that, we quickly proceed with the second article that has been picked up from page 7, which corresponds to ecology. Now, this is something that we are all experiencing. So this is something we can typically relate to. Now, we are just talking about the ongoing heat wave in India, more particularly in the peninsular region of India. You might be aware how the India Meteorological Department, just 2 days before, has clearly said that although Odisha, which has also been experiencing temperatures above 35 degrees for the last 1 month, will still receive some rainfall post 10th of April. But there is going to be no immediate respite for states like Karnataka and the Rayalaseema region, Telangana, because these are the states which are not only craving for a drop of water, they are also experiencing a sharp decline in groundwater, or rather the water table. Apart from that, they are soaring under high temperatures. Now, again, another report by IMD has clearly said yesterday that Bengaluru is reaching to a high of 37.5 degrees Celsius, and this has happened for the first time ever since 2016. So all in all, we are talking about global warming and how its impact is so clearly being experienced today, when most of the states in the southern part of India are reeling under unbearable temperatures. What fallout does it have on various other sectors of the economy? Let's talk about that. Now, before that, let's quickly understand that as per the IMD, what is a heat wave? Now, a heat wave is a phenomena where quantitative temperature, either in absolute terms or in comparison to previous few years, is too high over a given period of time. Typically, it exceeds more than 4.5 degrees Celsius when you talk about the averages of previous years, right? So let's also remember that in India, as per the IMD, the heat wave as of now is a phenomena that has been caused more because of the El Nino effect. Now, let's remember that usually El Nino years are much warmer. They will experience a much higher incidence of heat wave as compared to the La Nina years. The El Nino is associated with periods of warm weather, which are typically caused by the El Nino Southern Oscillation, or the ENSO phenomena. And also, let's remember that this is an oceanic and an atmospheric phenomena, which typically leads to warming of a particular area of ocean. Correspondingly, there is hardly a development of any high pressure which shall attract any kind of, or there is hardly any development of air pressure situation which will attract any monsoonal winds very fast, and therefore there is dry weather, there is extreme high temperature. So IMD is saying that the coming days will be no better. And why is it becoming such a problem for the country? Because it is impacting us in three clear ways. The biggest way is agriculture. Now, when there is so much high temperature, not only does it impact your crop yield, leading to food insecurity, but also overall soil fertility declines. There is more alkalization of soil associated with saltification that happens as a result of capillary action due to immense heat on the surface of land. Similarly, water availability goes down. There is hardly a possibility of constant continual irrigation. And apart from that, there are certain crops which perform exceedingly well. For example, if you are aware, in Karnataka and Maharashtra, most of the mango ripening during the season of April and May is associated with pre-monsoonal showers. In fact, in this part of the country, these pre-monsoonal showers are often called as mango showers. But this time, even the crop yield of mango has gone down dramatically. Why? Because there have been no pre-monsoonal or mango showers at all. So this is something that's clearly an impact of high temperatures and low rainfall. Now, urban and industrial centers, when there is too much heat, naturally, water demand in urban areas rises. This is a challenge for not only infrastructure, because the supply capacity does not increase. Already there is a lack of rainfall. Apart from that, people who experience almost everyday cases of heat stroke, sunstroke. Now, recently in the news, we are talking about dramatically increasing cases of bird flu in India once again. We are talking about the increase of diseases like typhoid and cholera in southern part of the country, all associated with water contamination, lack of rainfall, poor availability of water in the first place. So it is also creating a pressing demand over health services and infrastructure. Now, construction laborers. Rather, we are not only talking about construction laborers who are doing outdoor employment activities, but also more vulnerable segments of population, typically the elderly, the children, pregnant women, or people with comorbidities. They are the ones who will often fall sick, and it can have mortal consequences for a certain segment of population. Similarly, those who have inadequate access to sanitation, or those who have to really travel to get fuel, and those who have to travel to get wood because they do not have a permanent gas connection, typically in rural areas. So they will also be the ones who will be hugely impacted by this phenomena. Now, the availability of electricity also becomes a huge issue in reducing the damaging effect of heat wave. But the problem is here again, we talk about social economic inequalities. Now, on the one hand, because of intense summer and poor rainfall, demand for appliances such as refrigerators, air conditioners, coolers, it will rise dramatically. But then which segment of the population can afford these movable electronic goods? Not everybody. So these white goods again are luxury items for most segment of the population. So again, social economic inequalities will play a major part in determining who will get impacted more by the ongoing phenomena. Similarly, coal-fired power plants, since currently they are contributing to a major source of supply to India's electricity segment, they will also further experience a high demand. Similarly, today, as we know, literally about 1/4 of energy supply is being taken care of by solar energy. But then solar energy still is something that has not been democratized properly. Now, we do talk about how the government under various programs has universalized the installments of solar rooftop panels. But again, that is only in few select areas, not across the country. That is one issue. Lack of accessibility to constant source of renewable energy, plus the expenses that are involved in installing and operating. So these are also things that have prevented a universal implementation of solar power. And therefore, the transition that India aims to make by 2030, in line to its NDCs and its Sustainable Development Goal commitments, India is saying that 50% of our power should be from non-fossil fuel sources by 2030. But how much of this will be possible? Because the more heat waves attack, the more we will demand electricity, and the more people will draw electricity from coal-fired plants. So the higher demand will make the change to solar energy more difficult. Similarly, the article is also complaining about intermittent nature of solar power. Also, let's understand that it is due to lack of adequate power storage infrastructure that during the peak demand seasons, the supply becomes pretty less. Similarly, what could be the challenges then in changing towards renewable energy? One of the biggest challenges is storage, as the article already said. Now, mostly as of now in India, commercially available and commercially suitable forms of energy storage are either battery-based storage or pumped hydro storage, but both are getting badly hit because of water shortage, delayed monsoons. In the period of intense heat, when there is already a high demand of water, the storage capacity completely outruns the demand of power. Similarly, let's remember that despite all the hue and cry about solar energy, hydro energy, wind energy, the reality is, as per data, despite whatever efforts we are making, the total renewable energy capacity of the country has barely increased when you compare it today and from financial year 2016. So in all these years, about 8 years, there has been no much statistical improvement in adopting renewable energy on a large scale. So there are clear-cut concerns, for example, when we talk about, let's say, thermal power, or when we talk about hydropower. Most of the hydropower plants are situated in the Himalayan, sub-Himalayan regions, but there as well, the problem is heat wave and water crisis is ongoing. And therefore, as per one of the analysis reports created by World Resource Institute, India has lost about 14 terawatt hours of thermal power generation only because of water scarcity in 2016. It has increased only further. So all these challenges that are multifaceted in nature can be attributed to global warming, and probably countries like India, which are giantly galloping economies, will continue to face very harsh impacts of global warming until mitigated. Now the next article is page 6 again, and we are talking about internal security when we say that today we say that in the light of Atmanirbhar Bharat or self-dependent India, India's defense forces have got a major shot in the arm with government's commitment towards military modernization. So the article talks about a paradox, and the paradox is, on the one hand, we say that in the line of Atmanirbhar Bharat or self-independent India, we are adopting 2024 as the year of technology absorption, which means that more and more technology, latest technology, state-of-the-art inventions will be adopted into India's defense empowerment, which is a very good thing. But the paradox that the article is highlighting is that on the one hand is this disruptive technology that we are adopting. On the other hand, is an adoption of disruptive technology sufficient? Is it the only thing that's needed to enhance our military and security power? Is that all? Or is there something else that needed? So here comes the question of absorption. What do you mean by absorption? So the article clearly has 3 parts to it. The very first part explains what is disruptive technology. In simple terms, any technology which completely replaces the older one, which is state-of-the-art, which is very sophisticated, complex, modern, which is using modern-day interventions like artificial intelligence, which is based upon proper data analysis. All these highly computerized systems are all disruptive technologies because they will quickly take over the existing old conventional technologies. So this absorption that Indian Army is today doing because of governmental efforts in the field of disruptive technologies are for everybody to see. Now, the latest in this area is the use of artificial intelligence in defense. The use of autonomous weapon systems such as using drones, sensors, robotics, space technology, hypersonic weapon systems. All these are definitely increasing the combat capabilities, defense capabilities, monitoring capabilities of Indian Army, which is really a wonderful thing that has happened. But the problem is, it is not just about adoption. Today we are stuck at a stage of adoption. We must slowly move towards absorption. When we say absorption, the article argues that when you adopt a disruptive technology, always remember that adopting something new doesn't mean letting go of something that you already have. Because the old systems or the conventional systems that have been existing before the AI generation even came are also equally important, because today we talk about only technological advancement, but the conventional age-old systems were not about technology as much. They were more about human effort. They were more about strategy of war. They were more about coordination between various units of military. They were more about the idea, the warfare planning or warfare strategization. They were more about discipline. So all those are also very important values. So when you say absorption, you mix the modern technology with the age-old ongoing concepts that are being used in India's defense. When both will come together, only then we can say that yes, absorption is taking place. But as of now, the absorption has not happened because we are just focusing on adopting, introducing new systems into our military. So this is the main key argument of the article. The article says that while the new systems are known as disruptive technologies, the age-old existing ones are called as legacy systems. Legacy system is a very common word even in computer science. But in military parlance or in military language, it means the equipment, technology and strategies that were existing from before. So the need of the hour is to mix the legacy system with disruptive technology to create an unfeeling, all-round and multifaceted defense system. So let's see whether we can do that or whether we shall not be able to do that. So this is exactly what the article is trying to say, that whenever you take something new, make sure you are not discarding something that has already been existing. So the new disruptive technologies have to come as a complement. Rather, they have to be complementary to the existing legacy system. The article then gives certain very interesting examples. It says that today the whole world is talking about disruptive technology, state-of-the-art AI in defense. Nice, it is really amazing. But let's remember that when the ongoing conflicts have been happening in the last 2-3 years, we can take an example of Russia-Ukraine, we can definitely take an example of Israel-Palestine, we can take an example of Azerbaijan-Armenia. In all these battles, what is being clearly noticed is that technological equipments are not working as much as military strategy is paying off. A very good example has been taken in the case of Russia-Ukraine. It says that although initially Ukraine was doing very, very well when it came to defending itself from ongoing Russian attacks. So Ukraine was also doing counterattacks. Why? Because it had huge state-of-the-art, modern, the best technology available through NATO channelization. It was US backed, it was EU backed, it had all kinds of modern AI based technology, but the benefit of technology was very short lived because eventually Russia, which was using traditional battlefield strategies, traditional values, similarly traditional methods to fight a war, was able to outdo or outperform Ukraine only because of its strength of strategy rather than only technology. So that's one clear-cut proof. Similarly, when we talk about Armenia-Azerbaijan war, now you might have heard about the Nagorno-Karabakh area that is actually technically owned by Azerbaijan, but it was an area of huge battle between both these nations. Even during that time, situation was not very different. So what we have seen in these wars is that technological advancements pay you to a certain limit, but eventually it is all about wars are won in the minds of men. That is something that the article is trying to re-endorse. It says that initially technology might benefit you, but technology is not the only thing that can benefit you. So then what can India learn from these lessons, and how do you do effective disruptive technology absorption? Adoption we have done, absorption, how to do that. So one thing, usually when you talk about AI and all this fancy technology, it is known only by the top level officers or by the top level intelligence agencies. The people who are actually on the battleground, our soldiers, they are not very familiar with the use and technique behind these technologies. Sometimes it backfires, sometimes it fails them. Sometimes they find it an additional burden to undergo long, complicated training in these new weaponry. So that's something that we need to take care of. And for this situation, the article has used a word called democratization of disruptive technology, which means that disruptive technology is DT. So when you democratized it, you mean that the lowest unit of the army should be aware absolutely about how to operate it, that too with full comfort and full ease. Training has to be focused more upon just usage. Similarly, let's understand that we have to focus on survivability. For example, modern battlefields are also very evolving situation. So when a country adopts disruptive technology, it should not forget that the other country will also be equally professional and equally profound in using the disruptive technology interventions. So these are constantly evolving, which means you can't just adopt technology and sit with it, believing that yes, you are empowered and wow, kudos. That's not it. It's not a static thing. You need to constantly evolve and rebuild on this technology. So that is the need of the hour, which any country like India cannot afford to neglect. Similarly, along with adopting this technology, what about tactics? Tactical changes are equally important. With the changing nature of geopolitical situations across the world, we know that whether you talk about the South China region or whether you talk about the Red Sea area, now, in all these places, there is a constant skirmish going on all the time. There is a constant battle-like situation. With this evolving nature of warfare, with this evolving nature of, you can say, diplomatic tussles between nations, there is a need to be very, very tactically smart. That is also something article says. Then the article talks about technology absorption also means that you should have several macro level changes. For example, human resource management has to be taken care of in the armed forces. Similarly, we need to have specialists, not just soldiers, but specialists at the higher level who can effectively train and keep motivating, keep modernizing the people who are working at the lower units. Similarly, let's remember a sense of unity and coordination is equally important, and it also means respecting your past legacy. What previous generation of soldiers and militaries have been following, that is something we need to just build upon, and this new technology probably could just give it another dimension, but it should not completely replace that. So that's the whole purpose behind the article. With that, the next article for the day is page number 1 itself. We are talking about GS3, that's economy. The article says, in India today, as of now, as per a recent investigation, a recent analysis, in December 2023 or by December 2023, various households across India have been reported to be living under extreme high amount of debt, that is borrowing. The article investigates why is this phenomena happening and is it something to really worry about? Will it hamper India's economic prospects in the long run? Now recently, let's remember just about 2 weeks back, the news rattled everyone when it said that India's GDP is all set to cross even 8%. That is unusually high, given that most other economies, the largest such economies, including US, UK and China, have been reeling with a GDP of under 5. So that came at a time when it was believed that in India, investments, stock markets, all these segments are doing extremely well. But then suddenly today, we are talking about a phenomena that often gets neglected when we tout and we celebrate a high GDP growth. So here we are talking about how from December 2023 onwards, in fact, the Reserve Bank of India had been reporting that across various households, the net financial savings had reduced. The households, Indian homes were saving less money. Now we are doing a very micro level analysis here, individual unit or household level of consumption unit. So the savings fell down to 5.1% of GDP in the financial year 22-23. This was in fact lowest in the last 47 years. While it was looking like a major concern, the finance ministry did not react much. In fact, it said that it is absolutely okay. It is nothing to really regret about, because the reason why the household saving has declined and borrowing has increased parallelly, the reason is that various individuals, families, rather the Indian middle class, in fact, is taking more and more loans to buy assets like homes, cars and other luxury goods. So which means that overall, it is a sign of prosperity, it is a sign of better consumption, better lifestyle. So probably nothing to get worried about. But the finance ministry's response also says, had highlighted that taking debt therefore may not be something to always worry about. In fact, it could be an optimistic thing that probably it's reflecting a kind of future growth trajectory. A higher demand, a higher consumption would eventually be linked with a much higher production, with a much higher investment, higher public spending and overall better economic growth. So probably things would settle down in some time. But today, Suddenly, once again, eyebrows have been raising when we say that by December 2023, India's debt level or household debt level rose up to 40% of the GDP. Now, this again is an unusually high number. Why? The net financial savings, they fell down even further. Now, recently, just now we were talking about 2022, 2023, 5.1%. By December, it had come down to even lesser, 5% of GDP. So, it was clear that although it is all because people are taking loans indeed for a better lifestyle, but most of these were unsecured personal loans. These were the ones that were growing by very, very fast margins. And this then was followed by household debt, secured debt, agriculture loan and business loans. So while some of these were loans for productive purposes, most of these were unsecured personal loans. Now let's remember, whenever we talk about unsecured personal loans, now this becomes a very dangerous territory. An unsecured personal loan probably sometimes leads to a problem of poor credit absorption. Now, this is one problem. Which is often highlighted when we talk about financial distress among the low middle income group families in India. Now, when we say lower credit absorption, it means that an individual or a family may have taken a personal loan with the idea of floating a business, with the idea of buying a house, but eventually they fell into some kind of a medical necessity or emergency. They fell into some kind of a cultural necessity, which could mean a family or any kind of cultural event in the family, which, like dowry, for example, people spend so much on that. So sometimes people end up spending for those non-productive purposes rather than actually spending for the reason for which they have taken money. And this becomes a problem. This phenomena of rechannelizing your borrowing into a non-productive source or a different purpose other than for the one you borrowed money for is known as a poor credit absorption situation. So when you talk about unsecured personal loan, this problem completely gets highlighted. So this not only further pushes you down the debt trap, it could also mean that in the longer run, you might constantly continue to fall into an intergenerational debt cycle. So this is always a dangerous trend. So therefore, when today we are saying that overall household debt could be a positive phenomena because people are taking loans to do something productive, let's not ignore, as per the article, that sometimes these loans could also be very, very unsecured. Sometimes these loans could also be from a non-commercial enterprise. Now, then there are banks who are operating at a very, very micro scale in rural and urban India, which are sometimes rolling out hundis or some kind of a payment system where jewelry is getting mortgaged or through some kind of exchange. Promissory notes. Now, most of these are operating at a very, very informal level, and therefore it further leads to some kind of economic violence on the vulnerable people, and hence borrowing has both aspects to it. This is exactly what the article is trying to highlight. So the analysts are also predicting that the net savings for households will continue to be unchanged at about 5% of the GDP for the upcoming months as well. So even in the next coming few months, there will be no dramatic improvement in the saving amount, since already the borrowing limit is pretty high. So they estimate that full year saving will range between 5 to 5%, 5.5% of GDP. Now this also means that due to declining incomes, now we know that economic recession hit immediately, and it started right from 2022, when the economic climate across the world was negative, when there were so many layoffs happening. During that situation, incomes sharply declined. And then repaying the loans became a challenge for most middle class families, which again perpetrated the cycle of constant borrowing. So this probably also explains why the net saving amount is dropping down while the borrowing is constantly shooting up. So the gross financial savings they may have increased slightly, but financial liabilities among the people are also increasing, and so is annual borrowing. This is clearly related to declining incomes, job insecurities, and yet demand for much higher luxury and comfort goods that has been propagated, associated with a much higher quality of lifestyle, at least in urban areas. So these are certain paradoxes that the article talks about. With this, we'll proceed with an article that has been culled from page 12, relating again to GS Paper 3 Ecology. The article is highlighting a very interesting development where the Honorable Supreme Court has announced that the right to prevent yourself against climate change is akin to right to life envisaged under the Article 21 of Indian Constitution. Therefore, Supreme Court says that every individual, particularly the vulnerable components of society, have every right to live a life that is characterized by hygiene, safe, stable environment, clean, non-toxic air, proper sanitation right, and therefore they also need a life that is comprised of equality in comparison with all other members of society. So therefore, according to the Supreme Court, right against climate change is absolutely in line with not just Article 21, the right to life and liberty, but also Article 14, that's right to equality. So it's about both. One, people have every right to live a life that is non-toxic in terms of the environment in which they are living and breathing in terms of access to infrastructure, but also everyone is equal when it comes to demanding a clean, hygienic and non-toxic life. A clean environmental access is a right that shall be available to every Indian citizen, just like other subcomponents of the right to equality, Article 14. Therefore, in the same light, Article 29, when it promises you right to life, it also therefore invariably promises you right to health. So therefore, right to health is an integral, an inbuilt component of Article 27. That's what the court says, and it says that of late in India, this right to life and right to health is being gravely marred due to rising air pollution, due to increases in vector-borne diseases. Now we can talk about the cases of dengue, we can talk about the cases of malaria, we can talk about, as I said now once again, the reports about bird flu is on the rise, the reports about cholera due to heat wave is on the rise. So all these, in fact, we can also talk about various kinds of cancers that are perpetuating in many Indian states. Now, people usually say that it is related to the Green Revolution states, but then even in industrialized states, because of underground pollution and metallization of soil because of industrial toxins, the level of NCDs, non-communicable diseases, have also shot up tremendously. So when you talk about extreme weather phenomena like droughts or flooding or cloudburst or a shortage of food supply because of breakdown in supply chains, failure of crops and other climate disasters, all these are impacting India's right to life. That is, a right against climate change. That's also something the article says. The article also says that it is the inability of the peripheral communities or the marginalized communities to adapt to climate change, which makes them experience the worst impact of climate change. Now, it goes without saying, when we use the word vulnerable, as per your GS paper 2 social justice, we are trying to say that somebody, an individual or a community, who is 2 times or 3 times more likely to face a social, economic or political problem is a vulnerable person or a community. In these cases, often, whenever there is an extreme climate event, the displacement is experienced by the poor most segment of society, and hence they are the ones who are, in general, unable to cope up with climate changes. So climate resilience is very, very poor in poor communities due to lack of infrastructure and lack of financial power. So that's what the article says, that clearly it is a social economic discrimination whenever right to clean climate is being denied to people. So if climate and environmental degradation are causing acute food and water shortages, it will definitely impact the vulnerable communities more than the rich communities. So the court says that the important role that solar energy could play in sort of stopping climate change is tremendous, and India does have a massive solar potential. Let's not forget that India has in fact the 4th largest installed capacity of renewable energy. Let's also remember that in 2023-2024, out of the total energy generation capacity of about 9,000 something megawatt, 8269 came from non-fuel sources. So which means our country is likely in fact to account for 25% of global energy demand, and at the same time we also have a massive solar energy potential. So if we meet this demand and supply scenario, then probably we shall provide much more climate justice to many more people in the country. And by shifting towards renewable energy, India can definitely mitigate the risk associated not only with shortage of energy, but also it can mitigate the total greenhouse gas and global warming in the long run. So adoption of renewable energy will not only reduce pollution, it will not only reduce emissions, it will reduce India's carbon footprint, and eventually it would also reduce India's healthcare burden that is emanating primarily because of air pollution and toxicity. So that was the observation in the article, and then the last article for the day talks about, not the last really, the second last article of the day taken from page 12 talks about how the Kochi shipyard has signed a deal with US Navy regarding repairing of ships. Now, why is this such an important initiative? Because it is not just a plain deal between the two countries. It signals a much more future cooperation with each other, not only in exchange of state-of-the-art technology in naval segment, but also it signals integration among like-minded countries like India and US when it comes to the politics of South China Sea and security of India, security of the Indo-Pacific region. So that is what in the longer run the article points out to. The article said that the pact that has been signed between US Navy and the Kochi shipyard has been signed under the military Sealift command, and this is a non-financial agreement that has happened between both the countries. What are the benefits for both of them? The biggest benefit is that India and US will be business opportunity providers to each other, and Navy ship repairs could be a very interesting area of exchange for both the countries. It will also reduce the total travel and transportation cost for US Navy by avoiding the need to travel long distances just for very small wear and tear problems. So India can become a very good base for providing such solutions. Plus, both the countries have much stronger commitments with regards to investing in maintenance, repair and overhauling of naval equipments. Similarly, the article also highlights how UK is involved in the process. Now, the UK Littoral Response Group, the LRG, also arrived in Tamil Nadu for maintenance regarding the naval equipment, various ships and various vessels. And this is the first time a Royal Navy vessel, a Royal Navy ship is actually undergoing maintenance at an Indian shipyard. In the long run, it is about logistical sharing, it is about intelligence sharing, it is about maneuver sharing in the naval segment between India, UK, US. It is also signaling a stronger, growing defense partnership among these countries. Now, this will therefore also lead to more military, rather naval exercises between these countries, which will be for the purpose of training and exchanging technology, exchanging intelligence, exchanging human resource development in the naval segment between the countries, specifically in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, ultimately, the larger target is to prevent. The larger target is to create a strength, a capacity against aggressive countries like China in this area. Similarly, UK has also launched Defence Partnership India, and it plans for Career Strike Groups 2025 to visit the Indo-Pacific, which further highlights the need for cooperation between UK and India. And on that light, the last article of the day is a very interesting development. Now, we are talking about Tata Advanced Systems Limited. It has announced a successful deployment of its optical satellite known as TSAT 1A, and this has been done in partnership with SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. So the spacecraft has been deployed, and the entire deployment was just a part of a larger program which is referred to as Bandwagon 1 mission. So this was launched from the US, and the achievement is a huge success for a collaboration that was signed last year in November 2023, and the entire purpose eventually will be a much better Earth observation capacity. So therefore, the TASL announced that their sub-meter resolution optical satellite, the TSAT 1A, in collaboration with SpaceX rocket, has been successfully launched. What is the intention? To deliver high-resolution optical satellite imagery, a much better collection capacity of evidences, dynamic range, low latency delivery through its multispectral and hyperspectral capacity. So this is the inbuilt technology in the satellite that has been deployed. And let's also remember that this is in light of the Bandwagon 1 mission, a mission that is a dedicated mission that was launched as one of its own kinds, first in fact of this kind, into a mid-inclination orbit in the space. The orbit offers a high revisit rate and provides faster flyovers of same point compared to other orbits. So therefore it is unique here. And apart from the TSAT-1A that has been launched now, today, in fact, this Bandwagon 1 mission has carried 11 other spacecrafts, including from countries like Korea, the Hawkeye 360, the Taiwan International, the IQPS, and Kepler Space. So this was all for the articles, and now let's have a look at the two mains practice questions. The first question talks about discuss the challenges and implications of India's transition or change from coal-based to renewable energy sources in the light of or amidst increasing heat wave and climate change concerns. So pretty much what we discussed in the articles, that how climate change and rising heat waves as per the IMD is reducing India's capacity to make a move towards solar power. Why? Because already the demand in peak season is so high that we are depending therefore on coal, which even today provides maximum of our energy need. So we need to talk about that. The second question says critically examine, which means you need to highlight the positives and the negatives. So critically examine the strategic importance of technology absorption for modern warfare, highlighting the key challenges and opportunities India faces in this endeavor, which means in this area, in this segment. So we need to talk about how state-of-the-art technology, typically the DT, the disruptive technology that the article today highlighted, has made a change definitely in the warfare systems. But that is not enough, because what we also need is better strategy and better coordination between DT on the one hand and the existing latency, the latent systems on the other hand. Exactly what we discussed. So that is something you need to mention here. Both are for 20 marks. And on that note, I take your leave for today's segment. Thank you so much to all of you. See you soon with other such interesting sections in future.